I watch like 50 movies that way. They're not good movies. It's sad movies.
Now, let me go ahead and explain a couple of things, because first off, we've been talking about really the Cold War in Europe up to this point, and how what we're going to do is an attempt to try to stop the spread of communism. And we've been focusing on Europe, but this is a worldwide conflict. So I want to go ahead and tell you, in 1949, we've got more bad news. In 1949, China falls to communism. China, being the most populated country in the world, now communist, is a problem. Now, I do want to point something out here before we really get started. The whole idea of containment is to stop communism from spreading. In 1949, China falls to communism. How are we doing at containing communism so far?
Very, very bad.
I mean, you can look at it in a few different lights. Yeah, China falls, that's a disaster. But have we stopped the spread in Europe?
Yes.
Yeah, at least for now. It's a continuous battle to stop communism from spreading. We have to stop it from spreading all over the world, and now it's gone to China. So what this means is, we're in a situation where we better start getting more aggressive in stopping the spread of communism. What we're going to talk about today is going to be our attempt to stop the spread of communism in Korea. Now, I'm certain you guys already know, North Korea is communist today. China is still communist today. But we're going to make a stand in 1950 as the Korean Peninsula is divided. Now, I want to give you the background of this as to how this happens. And then we're going to eventually get to the war itself. When World War II comes to an end, Korea was occupied by the Japanese. One of the deals that we make at Yalta and then later at Potsdam is that we're going to split Korea once the war comes to an end. Remember, at Yalta, we're talking about how the war is going to come to an end and what the post-war world is going to look like. We're going to make a deal with Joseph Stalin and tell him, now that the Japanese are kicked out of Korea, we need to figure out what we're going to do with this. We need to figure out how we're going to bring stability and a government to the peninsula. So we're going to come up with a deal where North Korea comes under the control of Stalin and the Soviet Union. Now, as we talked about yesterday, when Stalin has control over somewhere, what kind of government is he going to institute?
Communism.
He's going to institute communism. The United States is going to get control over South Korea. As we talked yesterday, what kind of government are we going to establish in South Korea?
Capitalism.
We're going to be capitalistic and democratic, certainly. So we're going to have two countries emerge. North Korea is communist, South Korea is capitalistic and democratic. Now we're going to need some organization here. So I want to talk North Korea first. We talked yesterday about those two characteristics you better have if Stalin's going to choose you to be in charge of this area. You have to remember, what two characteristics do you need to have if Stalin's going to pick you? Alan, you remember?
Be devoted to communism and be devoted to Stalin.
Excellent. You better be a communist, and you better be loyal to Stalin. That's really it. Because what happens if you're not loyal to Stalin?
He'll disappear.
You'll disappear, and he'll just find someone else. You're his puppet. Stalin's going to find someone in North Korea who is ambitious and a hardened communist. His name is Kim Il-sung. Now, I bet you might have heard this name before. Have we heard of another Kim in charge of North Korea?
Kim Jong-un.
Jong-un.
Grandfather.
That's his grandfather, is Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung is put in charge of North Korea, and he is Stalin's puppet. He is the communist leader of North Korea, but his problems really exist in one way. The peninsula's divided. It's split up. Kim Il-sung is ambitious. He would like to be the leader of all of Korea. What this means is Kim Il-sung wants to unify the peninsula under communism. Now, if he's going to do that, there are a few different avenues to take. He could try to negotiate. That's always a possibility. But is the United States going to allow this communist dictator to just take South Korea?
Oh, no.
No. So what's another option?
War, military force.
You can try to take it. Now let's kind of play this out a little bit. If it was just little North Korea against little South Korea, would that be a big deal for us?
No.
But what's the problem?
It's democracy versus communism.
Excellent. We have communism versus democracy. And in the Cold War world, you're either with us or you're against us. We're going to have a situation where the United States heavily backs South Korea. The Russians heavily back North Korea. We're going to put troops and supplies on the Korean Peninsula. Guess what the Russians are doing?
Same thing.
Same thing. It's going to be armed to the teeth, and it's split along the 38th parallel. Now, this is an imaginary line, the line of latitude, but it just so happens to work out really well where that line basically splits the peninsula almost exactly in half. If you found yourself north of that line, you're now stuck in communist North Korea. If you're south of that line, you're in democratic South Korea. Now we've got an issue here. I want you to take a quick look at the map. What's to stop North Korea from invading South Korea?
Nothing.
It's an imaginary line.
It's not like there's a wall.
There's nothing there. Stalin kind of whispers in the ear of Kim Il-sung. And he's probably, we'll never really know, but probably very clever in kind of the way he's doing this, because what we do know is he's kind of urging him on. He tells Kim Il-sung, gosh, you are a great leader. You're really good at this. Man, I wish all the Koreans had you as a leader. Only there was something we could do. I don't know. What should we do?
Invasion.
Kim Il-sung starts thinking, if I invade South Korea, could I take it? Could I, in fact, unify the whole peninsula under communism? What's the only thing stopping him from doing that?
Nothing.
You're right, it's just a line. But I'm saying if he invades South Korea, what's going to happen?
Communism versus democracy.
We've got a situation where we have an ally that would need our help. What would it look like if North Korea invades South Korea and we just said, hey, that's not our problem?
We look like we come back.
Does it make us look bad?
Yeah.
Would anyone want to be our ally at that point?
No.
So what's the only alternative if no one wants to be our ally?
Make
If they don't
ourselves
come to
allies,
us,
yeah.
they go to
Stalin.
Stalin. This is kind of the weird scenario that we find ourselves. In 1950, 5 years after the end of World War II, we're now in a situation where it's very possible military action is needed again. Because Stalin keeps whispering in the ear of Kim Il-sung, saying, just take the peninsula. Just move. The Americans aren't going to go to war over tiny South Korea. They're not going to do anything. Now, I'll go ahead and just kind of put this in your minds. If you were an American in 1950, 5 years after the end of World War II, and now there's a threat on the other side of the world, in tiny little South Korea, do you want to go back to war?
No.
This is kind of the weird problem that we have here. Most people that fight in Korea fought in World War II. It's a mere 5 years separated. And here's Stalin making a big gamble. He says, if you just invade, if you just bring huge force, there is no way the Americans will show up. They don't have the stomach for it. They don't want to go to war. We don't have a whole lot of troops stationed there. We have about 20,000 troops for the whole peninsula. That's it. They're the only ones there. In a weird kind of way, Stalin's making this international chess game by making a move. He makes his move, and now it's the Americans' turn to respond. He tells Kim Il-sung, if you just launch an invasion across the border, the imaginary line, the Americans aren't going to show up. Kim Il-sung is finally convinced, with the backing of the Soviet Union, using their weapons, using their money, Kim Il-sung is going to invade South Korea. When South Korea is invaded, the only thing they really have to defend themselves is a very small South Korean army and 20,000 American troops. They really don't have a whole lot going for them. And and the North Koreans are backed by the Soviet Union. They have Soviet planes, they have Soviet tanks, they have Soviet pilots flying these things. Now I want to just kind of play this game a little bit. If the Soviets invade South Korea, do we have a real serious interest in this?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now let me kind of play this out. If it's the Soviet Union doing it, and the Americans fight back, and a Soviet kills an American, do we have World War III on our hands here?
Yeah.
Both sides are in this weird situation that we've never really been in before. We need to back up our ally, but do not kill a Soviet. Because if you do, it could be World War III. And by this time, the Soviets have the atomic bomb. So if one Soviet dies, or one American dies at the hand of a Soviet, we drop the atomic bombs on each other. And we end the world. That's where we are here. This is really bizarre, because what we're fighting in the Cold War is, yeah, we're fighting the Russians, but we're fighting against an idea. And that idea needs to be contained. So we have a situation where now little South Korea gets invaded by little North Korea, and this is going to blow up into a world affair. South Korea is going to ask for help from a brand new international body. They say to the UN, the United Nations created after World War II, you exist for something like this. You exist because you said all the nations of the world will come together to defend against an aggressor. Uh-oh. Have we heard this before?
The League of Nations.
The League of Nations was established to do the same thing. And how did the League of Nations do when they got their first test?
They didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Horribly. They folded. They were a paper tiger. Now, the next generation, the United Nations, here's your test. Are you going to fold again, or are you going to stand up to an aggressor? The United Nations is going to approve military action. We're going to have 16 nations send 500,000 troops to go help South Korea. But about 90% of them are Americans. Now again, we got to look at this in the lens of the Cold War. Is it the United States fighting against North Korea?
No.
Who is it?
It's the UN.
It's the UN. So it's not us against the Russians. It's the UN against North Korea on paper. But let's be perfectly honest here. Who's actually doing the fighting?
The Soviets and Americans.
We've got the Soviets against the Americans in this weird little scenario. Now, I want to just go ahead and play it forward here a bit. What we're going to see in Korea is bizarre because it's what's called a proxy war. It's us against the Soviets, but not officially. Officially, it's the